10 months ago, we made a huge decision and we applied for our permanent residency in South Africa. Now, we weren't in a rush and we had a plan, but what followed was way more complicated, way more expensive, and way slower than we could ever have imagined. And now here we are 10 months later, no approval, no communications, just silence, and we continue to wait. So why did we go down this route in the first place? And why not just follow the easier visa route that so many people take? Well, let's take a step back and let's explain, despite everything that's happened so far, why we still don't regret this decision. Now, we've been visiting South Africa for over 10 years. And if you've been following this channel for any length of time, you'll know that we visited for the first time back in 2014 and absolutely fell in love with the country, the lifestyle, the climate, the people, and all the various amazing places that you could have explore. And for the first time, it felt like a place that weren't just visiting for vacation, but somewhere that felt like coming back home. And it was probably the first time that we ever felt like this is a place we want to come back to. James and I both like travel and both like adventures, and we could never understand why people went back to the same place until we visited South Africa. And since then, with the pandemic as an exception, we've been back every single year. And by 2023, we decided to invest in a property, and I've spoken about that on the last few videos, and I'll put a link up here to go and watch those videos again that explains the decision we made to buy rather than continue renting every year. And of course, this means that we have a home base, and it's part of our longer term strategy to eventually spend our Northern Hemisphere winters in South Africa and then our summers in Europe. Now, we're not in a rush because James isn't retired yet. I'm retired and I've been spending 3 months there. In fact, this year I'm going to be spending 5 months there. So I'm going to be there in November and December, then coming back to the UK for 4 weeks and then going back again in January with James, and I'll be there till the end of March. And we've been using the 90-day visa that you get given on arrival, so hopefully I won't have any issues when I come back the second time and they'll give me another 90-day visa because I've been back to my country of origin, but we'll see if that happens. And so make sure you have hit the subscribe button so you can follow along and see what happens. Now, before I explain why we went down the permanent residency route, let's talk about other options for staying longer than 90 days in South Africa. Because if I'm honest, what most people do is apply for a visa, which is a lot easier to get. And then once they've got their visa and they can stay there for 3 or 4 days, they then apply for their permanent residency. But we decided to kind of do it the other way around and skip that step and go straight for the permanent residency approach. And the main reason for that is because, as I've said already, we weren't in a big rush to get our residency or to be able to stay there longer. So although this is much more complicated, in the end it will save us money and time because we're not applying for these others, but that probably isn't what you want to do. So let's just talk through the various options. And the first one is the 90-day tourist visa. And this is what a lot of countries get upon entry. So if you're from Europe or from the US or Canada or Australia and 90 other countries, then you'll automatically be given a stamp in your passport, which will give you 90 days to stay in South Africa. But if this is the only way you're staying, then if you're repeatedly leaving and coming back, leaving and coming back, then it is up to the whim of the person, immigration, who's stamping your passport, and they may decline it. And as I said, we'll see what happens to me when, for the first time ever, I leave the country for a few weeks and come back again. We'll see what they say. So that's the first option that obviously everybody gets. The next option is the temporary retirement visa. And here you need to prove that you have income of 37,000 Rand per month. And that could be from a pension, from an annuity, or it could be other kinds of income like rental income. And this will give you a visa up to 4 years, but of course you're not allowed to work in South Africa while you are there. And it typically takes about 8 to 12 weeks if you're applying from abroad. And if you're applying within South Africa, then it can take between 4 and 6 months to get. The next type of visa, which is a fairly new visa, is the digital nomad visa, or it's actually called the remote work visa, that was launched in 2023, 2024. Here you need to prove that you're earning 650,000 Rand a year from a foreign employer, which means you're earning about £32,000 a year. You have to have health insurance and obviously a contract from your employer and the proof of residence as well. And you can renew this for up to 3 years at a time. It takes about 8 to 12 weeks to get. but this doesn't give you a pathway to getting permanent residency, and you also have to be mindful that if you stay longer than 183 days in South Africa, you are liable for South African tax, and I think that's true whatever approach that you go down. The next type of visa is a spouse or relative visa, and here if you've been married for more than 5 years or cohabiting for more than 2 years with a South African citizen or a permanent residence holder, then you'll be able to apply for this spouse or relative visa. And just to mention a few other options that are available as well: volunteer visa, which will give you a 1-year visa and it can take 6 to 10 weeks to process. You can get a study visa, which means you have to be accepted by a South African college or university, and it can take 8 to 12 weeks to get that particular visa. And then lastly, a business visa, and here you need to have invested 5 million rand into the country and you have to create a certain amount of jobs. This is something we were thinking about way back when we were fantasizing about buying a B&B, and this would have been a way to get residency in South Africa using this visa. And if you do apply for this, it can take up to 6 months or more to actually get it. So yes, there are lots of options that you can explore, and they all have various limitations, and that's why we decided to kind of skip over all of them and actually apply for our permanent residency. So let me just talk you through that process. Now, it's designed for people who can prove that they've got a net worth of 12 million rand. And this isn't as hard as it seems, because you can use your home, you can use your pension, you can use savings, you can even use your car to contribute to that 12 million rand. And of course, you don't have to make any direct investments into South Africa to get this particular residency. But the process has been absolutely brutal, and I think if I'd have known what the process was like, I've still done it, but I think we would have thought about it a little bit more. So you have to prove that you've got 12 million rand of net assets. You also need to have a police clearance check, and in the UK you get that through Acro, and it costs about £65 each to get that. You also need to have a medical certificate from your doctors. You need to have a sworn affidavit confirming your finances, and all of these documents either need to be certified or notarized. Now, one thing I learned is that in South Africa, it's really easy to get a document notarized. You can just walk into a police station and they'll do it for you straight away, and it doesn't cost you anything. Getting something notarized in the UK is way more complex and expensive, and you have to find a notary, and there aren't that many of them. So I had to drive about an hour to a notary, and it probably cost me about £200 to get my birth certificate notarized. To get things certified, you can go to a post office and you can pay a post office to certify a document. So for example, if you have sending a copy of the police clearance check, then if you take the original with you, they'll put a stamp on confirming that it is a copy of the original. And we also had to submit copious amounts of information about proof of cohabitation because we weren't married at the time, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, it took the whole of the summer of 2024 to get this information together. Every Friday I spent a couple of hours working on the next piece of information, digging through loads of records to get all the information together. And then eventually, when we had our pack ready, we booked an appointment at the VFS office in London. You pay to have an appointment and you go in, then you submit your paperwork, they check through it, and then you are done and dusted and you're given a receipt number. And then you just wait and you hear nothing. And then 3 months later, in February of this year, I got really excited because I saw that I had an email from the head office in Pretoria. And I got very excited about that, and all the email said was that we can confirm that your application has now left London to head for Pretoria. So basically it had sat in the London VSF office for about 3 months. Now, apparently the reason that happens is because they wait to have a certain amount of packs or applications together and then they send them over as a whole, but just crazy inefficient. And talking of inefficiency, we are told that everything is still processed by hand in Pretoria. So there's hundreds of thousands of applications and they're all processed by hand. So you can imagine how slow that is. And that means that we do not expect to hear anything about our application for between 3 and 5 years. But as I said, we are not in a hurry because that aligns really well with our timescale for James retiring as well, which is when we would want to be able to spend more than 90 days in South Africa. And to make matters worse about this, there's absolutely no way you can track your application. Even if you've got your reference number, there is no online system that you can go on for a residency application and see where it is. Now, we did manage to get an email of someone who did reply in Pretoria, and they were able to confirm that they did actually have our application, but we can't get any more information than that. So I think after maybe 2 years, we might start trying to be a bit more aggressive about following up. But right now we just need to sit and wait, because I suspect our application is just gathering dust on a shelf along with hundreds of thousands of others. Now, here's something that caught us off guard a bit, because at the time of our application, James and I weren't married, so we needed to prove that we had been cohabiting together for at least 2 years. And that meant sending all sorts of financial information showing we had joint finances. It meant digging out lots of old travel records showing that we had booked a hotel or flights together, so we were staying in the same room. And we also had to get 5 letters from friends confirming that we were in a relationship, and of course those letters had to be certified along with their passports as well, so it all gets quite complicated. And the fact that we got married this year doesn't really make any impact either, because if you're a married couple, you need to be married for 5 years, first of all. So if you are applying for your residency jointly and you are not married, then my suggestion is that you start gathering all of the cohabitation information beforehand, because boy, that was the most complicated part. Like literally going back 5 years and finding airline tickets with both our names on, or hotel rooms with both our names on showing we were staying in the same room, was a bit like finding a needle in a haystack. Now, of course, if you want to keep your costs down, you can try and do the application yourself. But again, my advice to you would be don't do that. You use a consultancy. We used a consultancy called Integrate Immigration, and I'm so glad that we did. And these were recommended to us by friends who have gone through exactly the same process and come out the other side with a successful result. So basically, the immigration consultancy told us exactly what we needed to produce. They gave us advice at every step of the way. They reviewed the information that we sent them, and then every week we would get an update email from them showing what we'd done and what we needed to do next. So it gave us a real kind of good guided roadmap of what we needed to do. And then at the end, they put the whole pack together for us. They had their another team review that pack of information to make sure everything was correct. So this means that it gives us the absolute best chance of getting a successful conclusion when our residency application is actually looked at. I don't think we could have done this on our own. I think it was money well spent, and I think there's no doubt about it that we would have missed some steps out, or we would have not done things correctly, like knowing what should be certified and what needed to be apostle stamped. We would have never known that even, and you can search online, you get so much different conflicting information. So my advice to you is definitely use a consultancy if you can, because they will give you the best chance of being successful. And it might cost you more money in the short term, but it'll probably save you money in the long term, because hopefully the application will be accepted. So talking of costs, let's just share with you what we've spent so far. So first of all, the immigration company, Integrate Immigration, cost us £1,670. To get our police certificates for both of us was £130. We had to pay £80 for the actual VFS appointment, and then the application fee was £335.90, giving a grand total of £2,215.90. And then when our application is approved, if it is approved, we have to pay a further £5,000 to get our residency. So guys, this is definitely not cheap, but if you're thinking longer term and your goal is to spend half your life in that country, then it's definitely worth doing. Otherwise you're going to be flying back and forward. So here we are, we've applied nearly a year ago, and now we just need to wait and be patient and basically get on with our lives. And then hopefully one day we'll get an email either asking for more information or telling us that we've been successful, and hopefully not saying that we've been rejected. And since we decided to apply for our residency, up until now, we still feel like it was the right decision. We still are obviously really committed to South Africa. Obviously, we've invested in property there, and we are planning in a few years' time to sell that property and buy a slightly bigger 2-bedroom apartment, just kind of furthering our commitment, I guess, to South Africa, and how the residency will support that when James is retired and we basically want to spend longer there. So applying for a permanent residency is slow, it's bureaucratic, It's expensive, it's time consuming, and you need to be patient. But for us, it's a step forward to a much bigger plan. So if you are thinking about wanting to stay in South Africa more than 90 days and you've got any questions about anything that I've talked about today, do leave us a comment. We love hearing from you. We know that if we get lots of comments, we're on the right track, the good, the bad and the ugly. And of course, we do always make sure that we answer and reply to every comment that you leave. So please do leave a comment. But other than that, this is James, who's upstairs working, and Rob, and we will see you next week.